Good evening. We are going to be starting by giving each of the candidates 2 minutes to do a brief introduction to themselves. They had a longer period in the primaries, but we were just getting to know them. Hopefully you've seen the website, you've seen the articles and the letters that have been written about them and by them. So we're going to start by giving Mr. Kitchin 2 minutes to introduce himself, and then Ms. Haire. At the end of the presentation, when we're finished with the last question, the candidates will have an opportunity for closing comments. Ms. Haire will go first. Mr. Kitchin will be the final speaker. So at this time, Mr. Kitchin, the floor is yours.
Well, first, I just want to start by thanking all of you for being here and for the neighbors of the Mayo Peninsula for hosting this. This is democracy in action, and it just means so much to be here with you and to have all of you come out to participate in this. So, my name is James Kitchin, and I'm running for County Council here in District 7. So I grew up in this district. I grew up playing community sports, swimming, fishing, crabbing in the South River, and I graduated from Arundel High School. Lauren and I are raising our kids here. We live in Crofton. My kids are 8 and 6, so that's 3rd grade and kindergarten. They both go to Crofton Woods Elementary, which is at 118% capacity right now. It is the most overcapacity elementary school in the county, and they keep building in our neighborhood. And that's one of the reasons we jumped into this race. So my background is really that of an educator. I was a high school teacher. I taught government, U.S. history, and world history to high schoolers, and then a few years ago I switched, and I now work at UMBC, where I do public policy research, and I study local governments. I study city and county governments in large metropolitan areas, and there are a couple of things that I think my background brings to the table that are pretty unique. So first, as a former teacher, I'm going to be a very bold advocate for our teachers, for our students, for our public schools. Second, as someone who studied public policy, I think I can really help professionalize the decision-making process on the county council. I have been to council meetings where they have made $30 million, 20-year decisions, and they don't have the information that they need in order to make wise choices. I have been trained in policy analysis. I know what questions to ask. I know what data to look at. You can be guaranteed that if I'm on the council, every vote I cast will be based on ample public input, the most recent scientific evidence, the best data we can get our hands on, and will always be cast in the best interest of the general public and not in the best interest of a small group of campaign donors. I started this race just as an educator, as a researcher. I was not tied into any political structure. I was not part of the political machine of either party. And I'm really proud of the reception that we've got as we've gone around and campaigned. We've knocked on doors, gone to community meetings, and sat down for endorsement interviews and tried to get support. My campaign, we've been endorsed by the teachers, by the police, by the firefighters, by the League of Conservation Voters, by the Sierra Club, by the AFL-CIO. I'm small money certified. They did not know me before. I took my message of smart growth, of education, and of the environment, the 3 things we're focusing on, took them to those groups with my background, and I've gotten all their support. So I ask you to stand with them. If education is a topic you care about, vote for the guy who spent his career on the inside of the classroom. Vote for the guy that teachers are recommending to you. If public safety is an issue, stand with the police and the firefighters and vote to put me in office. If you care about the environment, vote with the people that work on the ground on those issues and vote to put me in office. If you are on Mayo and you care about these issues, I have been to lots of community meetings on the peninsula over the past year. Vote for the person who showed up. My time is up. But anyway, that threw me, but I'm very, very glad to be here with you tonight.
Good evening. My name is Jessica Haire. I am a candidate for County Council in this district. I'm going to give a quick shout out, especially to this gentleman in the Red Sox hat over here. Let's hear it for the Red Sox. I spent my early years in Boston, so that's exciting to watch them go. Thank you all for having me here tonight. I now live in Edgewater with my husband. We are raising 4 children together. I literally just a hop, skip, and a jump down the road. So I am a mom, I'm a wife, I'm also a volunteer, a civil engineer, and an attorney. So I have a lot of varied experiences that I bring to the table for the next county council. On the volunteer side, I'm a court-appointed special advocate for children in foster care. do have an active case. I work with this young girl. I actually have court for her next week, in sort of what's in the best interest of the child. Our mission is to find a safe, permanent place for all children to live and to thrive. I've also been a volunteer on the Anne Arundel Women's Commission, where the mission is to improve the quality of lives for women and families in the county. So that could be anything from Narcan trainings to human trafficking panels and the like. I've had an opportunity to volunteer for Governor Hogan on numerous occasions in court, defending his right of delegate appointment during vacancies in his campaign war room. I'm now on Team Hogan as a candidate. I'm very proud of that. It's been an exciting time. I think he's doing some really good things for our state. I am a civil engineer. I got a Bachelor of Science from George Washington University. I spent 3 years designing erosion and sediment control, stormwater, sanitary sewer, all of those critical infrastructure things. And then I put myself through law school. And I say all this to say that I bring a lot to the table, particularly when it comes to the general development plan. I can understand the real world impact of what it means when you put a development over here for the people who live across the street and what infrastructure we need. So if you're interested in that and you have concerns about that, I have a strong voice and a strong ability to advocate for really what's in the community's best interest and what the community wants from a practical real world background. I ask for your vote on November 6th. Thanks so much.
So the first question this evening, Ms. Haire will start.
All right, I'll keep it.
The question is, both of you have supported keeping South County rural and controlling overdevelopment. If you are elected, what specific legislation will you present to the council to advance that effort?
So I think there's a couple of things here, actually, and this gets to the Enclave project in Crofton. There are a few loopholes in the, oh, sorry, how much time do I have for this? 2 minutes. Okay, thank you. There's a few loopholes that are currently in the code right now that I think are problematic. One of them has to do with how we account for space in the schools and whether they are open or closed. And it seems to me that when a school is open, it's open for everybody, and it doesn't matter if it's got 30 seats available or 100 seats available. I think we need to make sure that we have a corresponding limit on the amount of development that can go in based on the actual number of seats that are available. And I think if we make that link, that will help prevent some of the circumstances we're seeing now. We've also seen some issues where what has originally been age-restricted housing, after it's already been permitted, has been converted to non-age restricted housing once the school has been open. I think that we need to close a loophole that allows that without public hearing and comment. So those are 2 pieces that I think would be critical in helping some of that.
Thank you. Mr. Kitchen.
Thank you. So, keeping South County rural is one of the first political memories that I have. Growing up in Crofton, I remember John Flacco running for county council when I was probably in middle school. And, I heard the phrase, keep South County rural. And it's still a refrain for a couple reasons. One, South County has been able to push back and protect a lot of its rural heritage, which is good. But 2, it's still a political rallying call because there is still the threat of overdevelopment encroaching down into South County. And so we've got to deal with that. The most important piece of legislation I'd put in on that issue specifically would be campaign finance reform. So there is talk on the county level, and I think this is a minimum, of banning developer contributions when a developer has pending legislation before the county. And so that needs to happen. And I think the gold standard is really creating a system of publicly financed campaigns where people can run on a campaign fueled solely on small contributions from the communities, from the people that actually live here. And that's when you know that the loyalties of your lawmakers are going to be on the side of the communities and not the side of the big developers. Why do the developers keep developing and keep developing? Because they have so much power in the political process. If we're not willing to talk about the power that their money buys them, then we're not going to get a long-term solution to that problem. We're just not. We're going to push back sometimes. I sometimes use a casino analogy when I talk about this. We will push back on some developments and we'll win, but over the long run, the house always wins. And right now, the developers control the house. We have to take that back from them, and we do that by going after their money. There are also lots of loopholes that do need to be closed. What's funny about that, this goal capacity, what Ms. Haire just explained, actually is currently the law. They changed it. Team Shu changed it to where they do actually count the seats now. The problem is they wrote the law to sunset after the election. And so we know what the solutions are, we just don't have the politically will to make them last because of the power that their money has bought them.
Thank you, Mr. Kitchin. Now, you're going to have the first answer on the next question. What do you see as the most pressing need for infrastructure in the county?
The most pressing need for infrastructure in the county. There are a lot of infrastructure needs that we have in the county. I would say schools, roads, and public safety infrastructure would be the three biggest needs, which really gets to the core of why I did jump into this race in the first place. But traffic has been getting absolutely out of control. It is out of control. I've learned how to drive here, and I am not sure in 8 years when my daughter is going to be learning how to drive that I'm going to be willing to teach her how to drive in my own community. Like I might have to take her on a weekend trip just to teach her how to drive in a car in a place where it's safe to do so. So I think we need to invest in traffic infrastructure upgrades for sure, especially on a peninsula where there's one road in and one road out. It is absolutely ridiculous to keep building in places where that happens. So I'd be very interested in that. Public safety infrastructure. Our response times are low, especially out here on the Mayo Peninsula. We do have a substation with a BLS, a basic life support service ambulance. That is temporary right now. We need to make that permanent, and we need to have a paramedic on it and have it be an advanced life support. I did a ride-along with the station, and I went out in a BLS ambulance where there's no paramedic, and we picked up this guy that had a head injury, and we needed to be able to stabilize him, and we literally had to stop and transfer him to a different ambulance that had the technology to do that, and then get him to the hospital. And that's crazy. Like, you need a permanent substation on the peninsula, and you need to have ALS services, so if anyone has a heart attack, that they can be taken care of. And in schools, our kids are overcrowded. My daughter had 30 kids in her first grade class. That is way too much. And again, my kids go to Crofton Woods, which is at 118% capacity, the most overcapacity school in the entire county. That is just not what our kids deserve. Our kids deserve to have small class sizes. They deserve to go into schools that are not getting overcrowded because of the way development is happening. And so those are the three things, and I would link all of those back to development. If we can't control development, we're not going to fix those infrastructure issues.
Ms. Haire.
So we agree on some of this. I do think schools are a major infrastructure need that this county faces. I also think roads are a major infrastructure issue that we face. The third one that I would actually look at would be stormwater and sort of flooding issues, erosion and sediment control that all goes in with that, particularly on the Mayo Peninsula, also in Edgewater Beach, there's a lot of these issues. Down in South County, in Rosehaven, they've got a road as well that floods every year. They're trying to literally raise the elevation of the road, the entire road, because they've got these flooding issues. And I think we need to take a really good, hard look overall, particularly in District 7, but in the county as a whole, at some of these flooding problems and the erosion and sediment control. It may also be linked to some overdevelopment in places, but we need to actually take a look whether we need additional drainage ditches, whether we need more reforestation to help filter some of that water out, etc., and prevent some of this additional erosion. I think that's something that the county needs to take a really hard look at. On the roads, 214. Our middle son went to Summit pretty much from the time he was kindergarten through 8th grade, or first grade through 8th grade. And coming here, I mean, it's difficult. It's a dangerous road. We would drive it every day. Making that left-hand turn can be harrowing. We certainly need to get that road widened. It's a big goal of mine to get that on the high priority list for state funding if I'm elected, so that we can have it widened, at least to have emergency vehicles be able to get down. So these are sort of the things that I would focus on. On the schools, I do believe we need to have additional smaller schools, and I think on a countywide basis that needs to be a high priority.
Okay, thank you. So Ms. Haire, you can hold the microphone. You both have talked about the need to expand infrastructure through roads, increase schools, and also to control the development. With the limited ability of the budget, where do you intend to find the money?
So I have a couple of interesting ideas, because I believe that we can do a lot of this without raising taxes. That is a big piece of my campaign. I've been speaking to a few different people, and I'll give you one idea actually today. They've done this successfully in the city of Annapolis, and I think we could use it really well in the county. They have put a solar park, a solar energy park, on a landfill in the city of Annapolis. It's otherwise unusable land. You don't see it. It's a public-private partnership in a way. So an independent private company comes in to build the solar panels that they put on the landfill, and they lease the land from the city. So they actually pay the city for this privilege. And then the city gets to use the solar energy at a steep discounted rate, so the city also saves money on its electricity bills. Now, the county auditor has done an audit of the benefit to the city on that landfill. A certain number should be coming out soon, but roughly they're estimating about $250,000 a year for the city. Now, that is only, I believe, 100 acres of solar. We've got 10 times that, because we've got way more landfills. We have 3 or 4 landfills that we could put this on easily. So we could actually do 10 times that in Anne Arundel County and generate that much more money every year. That much more money every year going towards capital projects and infrastructure improvements would go a long way. I think we could do things like this. We could do, forest management practices and things like that. Actually, Envision Mayo had put on a program about that not too long ago. We had a great presenter there who talked about these forestry management tactics that can actually generate income for the county. I think there are things that we can do like that would be an alternative to raising taxes and would allow us to improve the infrastructure in the county.
Mr. Kitchen.
All right, so this is literally the $1 million question, right? Like, how do you pay for everything? And there's not an easy answer to that, and I think as adults we can all start with that. Like sometimes we just have to make really hard decisions. But one, I think you do start with trying to get rid of waste, fraud, and abuse in anything, right? And so the best way to do that is to let loose the county auditor on the budget every single year. So the county charter says that the budget, the department heads have to turn their proposed budget to the county executive 120 days in advance of the end of the fiscal year. And then the county executive has to turn around and give the budget, his proposed budget, to the county council with 60 days. But there's nowhere in there where it says when the county executive has to give his budget to the county auditor. So this year through the county audit, the county auditor got it about the same time the county council did. She ran a quick report. She found about $9.5 million of waste in Steve Shue's budget. About $4.2 million of that was the operating budget, reoccurring savings we could have every single year. And she said, I did not have time to run a full report because of when I was given the budget. So the first thing we have to do is legislatively say, look, you have to get the budget information to the auditor with enough time for them to do that. And so you eliminate waste, fraud, and abuse. We do look for creative ways to find more money. But if you look at the math, we're still going to have really hard decisions to make. You're not going to make $1 million off a landfill and solve the infrastructure needs. So we do have to find a way to generate some revenue. And one, I would start with raising impact fees on developers to their full costs. So we charge them about 80% right now of their costs when they build projects. We both just talked about how a lot of the infrastructure needs come from being overdeveloped, and we are literally subsidizing that development. And so we raise those fees. That generates a lot more money right there. And then we look for other things. When my family visits my wife's family in California, we pay a tax on the rental car, and it's high. And I pay it because my car's in Baltimore and I'm in San Diego, right? So there's a way we can get money also out of people visiting us that would not be a burden on taxpayers that live here.
Thank you, Mr. Kitchen.
Sorry about that, Phil. I can't figure out how to turn it off.
We have a question from a member of the audience who's from Crofton, who's concerned about developers circumventing the codes through modifications and the adverse impact it's having on their community. What would you propose doing if you're elected to the council to address developers attempting to circumvent the code through modifications? Yes, first.
Okay. All right, so this is a big one. There's a couple things we need to do here. And some of them is closing the loopholes that are in the county code. But we, first of all, should just never allow a modification for having a public meeting. So the developers throughout the process, they're supposed to have public meetings with the communities. And since 2015, since Steve Shue took office, they have waived more than 530 community meetings. Like I don't that should just not be allowed. There should be nothing that allows that kind of a modification, right? So there are some modifications that we should just completely outlaw, and they try to tighten that up a little bit, in the spring, and they did not go far enough. There are still loopholes a mile wide where those meetings could still be waived if somebody wanted to. Two, we need to give the county council a little bit more power vis-a-vis the county executive when it comes to other things. There are both on the Enclave project in Crofton, on Turtle Run down here in South County, you literally have the county lawyer working with the developers council as a co-counsel for developers to try to help them figure out how to wiggle their way around the county code. The county lawyer should be the people's lawyer. They should be helping us push back and making sure that the developers are actually following the law that we've written. But right now, the county council has no authority to approve who the county executive picks as the county lawyer. And so we need to be able to take that power, and we need to have advise consent power over who the county lawyer actually is. And then we can make the county lawyer work for us as opposed to working for the developers. And then, again, there's just other ways we can tighten up the code to where these modifications would be so much harder to push through. But if things were more transparent, because community meetings could not be waived, and if we could trust the county government apparatus was actually working for us and not working for the developers, I think that would go a long way to help with the problem of these ridiculous modifications.
Thank you. Ms. Haire.
Thank you. So there's two, well, we agree on one thing, and that is that you shouldn't be able to waive a public hearing. I agree with that. I think that's something that needs to certainly be closed. The second thing I think we can do really is expand the time frame for advance notice to the public and expand the number of people that you give notice to. Because a lot of times what happens is people say, well, I didn't even know this was happening. They didn't get the notice because the requirement is only, X number of feet from the center of where they creatively measure where they're gonna actually measure the distance from, and so you get the minimum number of people. I saw this actually down in South County where someone was wanting to get a modification, and the notice that they had to give really, by the time they had measured, was one person. And so we need to make sure that gets further expanded, particularly in areas where your neighbors are not quite as close. I think with those two pieces in mind, we'll have better community input, and that allows the county to make better decisions with the community involvement. There are other loopholes, like I spoke about, where you should not be able to switch from an age-restricted to a non-age restricted without a public hearing. Those are small things. As an attorney, I currently do government contract litigation. These are things that I have seen as an engineer. I've seen zoning issues, I've seen modification issues, I've seen these things. I know firsthand kind of where some of the problems lie on a practical matter, and ways that I think we could make them better, and how to draft the language to do it. So I think that I could be really effective in helping with some of this stuff.
Thank you. Ms. Haire, you can hold the microphone.
Sure
This is the next question. Many of our senior citizens feel that it is becoming impossible to continue to live in the county in retirement. Between the tax burden and the lack of transportation options to help them when they can no longer drive, they feel they're being forced to move just to be able to retire comfortably. What would you do as a member of the council to make it easier for seniors to retire in the county?
So there's two things that I think would be helpful for retirees, and actually I've heard this comment quite a bit. Some of this comes actually at the state level, and some of it comes at the county level. I do know that Delegate Seth Howard and the candidate Ron George have been pushing pretty significantly to lower or eliminate taxes on retirement income entirely in the state, and I think that would be a huge help. So I'm fully supportive of that. I would definitely like to push for that on that front. The transportation side is something that I think we can help a little bit more with on the county council. I know there's been several proposals, and it is a widespread issue. We actually were both just at a community meeting for ACT, Anne Arundel Connecting Together, and one of their they have 6 or 7 prongs of things that they're looking to do, and one of the big ones is transportation. It affects not only retirees, but also people trying to get to court up in Annapolis, or people trying to get to work in Annapolis or elsewhere. I think bus service is the probably most easily facilitated at this time, although we don't have bus lanes and whatnot. So we really, that's something we need to put our heads together and think about it, but I think that that's the area where the county council can make the biggest difference, is trying to make sure we have adequate bus service.
Mr. Kitchin.
Yeah, so transportation is a huge issue, as is retiring here. I remember growing up, my grandfather, that was a big thing. He lived on a fixed income. They had waterfront property on the South River, and he would fight with the county tax office over and over and over, because he was like, my income is not growing, but my tax bill is. Like, what am I supposed to do, right? So I've seen my family live through that here, and I think that's absolutely one of the areas where we need to look at making tax burden for seniors in retirement a little bit lower, but we have to be willing to figure out where the money's gonna come from to make up for that, because like we're not just gonna like cut taxes and then increase your transportation at the same time. Those two things don't really go together. Like, we are constrained by the realities of accounting and math, and so that is always something that we're gonna have to keep in mind. I do think in South County we need targeted bus services, right? And so we just have the South County circulator that was put in, and I went and rode that the other day with a group of seniors, and it was great. It was awesome. Not everyone on it was seniors, but it was a good program, and we need to give that a chance to work. So that has a loop, starts in Annapolis Mall, comes down, there's a loop around South County, and then there's 2 zonal shuttles that you can call ahead of time, and they'll pick you up at your house, and they'll take you to a bus stop, and it's only $1. And so those kinds of programs absolutely need to work. What's the problem we have right now, where we're trying to give more services, and we have an administration and a team that is, we're gonna cut taxes, but we're also gonna increase your services, and sometimes we end up robbing Peter to pay Paul. And so we created the South County Circulator, but the way we did that is taking service away from the senior center in Edgewater, right? And that is absolutely ridiculous. We cannot create a new service without finding a way to pay for that, and we should not create a new service and have a press release where we're talking about how great this thing is we created when we created that by hurting other citizens over here. That is just not the way government should work. And if I'm on the county council, we'll try to find a way to do that without hurting, helping one group of citizens by hurting another group of senior citizens.
Thank you, Mr. Kitchin. You can hold the microphone. One of the questions tonight came from a resident who was concerned that the liquor board recently approved a license to a business in the peninsula, and their concerns about its impact on the community, on public safety, on traffic, and they're feeling that they didn't get an adequate opportunity to be engaged. How would you increase the public's involvement in not development in the sense of buildings, but development and economic development that has an adverse impact on the community?
On the community?
Yep.
Yes, that's a really good question. But I think you do it a lot the same way. Like, you go after, we need to strengthen the Forest Conservation Act as a whole. Right now, the state law says for every acre that gets cut down, we have to replant a quarter of an acre. And it needs to be at least a 1-to-1 capacity, but really we should be looking at the effects, like the environmental effects of it, and make sure that those are the same. Because if you cut down 4 acres of mature trees, and replant 4 acres of saplings, you're not getting the same environmental effects. And so I want it to be a 1-to-1 as far as, the environmental effects there. Developers can, instead of replanting, they can pay a fee and it goes into this fund. And that whole system needs to be reformed. 1, I think we need to raise that fee some, but 2, the county has, a Department of Forestry that is housed within inspection and permits is where it's at. And there have been years where the budget of the reforestation fund has been about $600,000, and $500,000 of it goes to paying the salaries of the people that work there. So we actually would not have a forestry department if we didn't cut down the forests, because we're literally paying for the forest department by cutting down the forests. It is absolutely bizarre, but that's one of the ways that this administration and their team has been running this fiscal shell game. We've been cutting taxes and trying to tell you all that we're fiscally sound, but we're doing it by cutting down trees. It's like, well, what are we going to do if we don't cut down trees? We're not going to be able to hire those 4 or 5 people that work in the county reforestation. So we need to look at that fee. If we're going to, there are times where the fee makes sense, where the county, if we were doing it right, could do a better job planting those trees than the developer could doing it on their own. So I'm not opposed to having it be there, but it needs to be much, much more stringent. It needs to be separated from the overhead of actually running that department. Like, we should not, the question should not be, do we save our foresters or do we save our trees? Like, we should be able to have both. And the money we get from cutting down trees should go to planting trees, not paying for county budgets.
Thank you. Ms. Haire.
We actually mostly agree on this one. I do think that if you cut down an acre of trees, you should have to plant an acre of trees. If you are paying for an acre of trees, the money should go to an acre of trees. That being said, I think there are some other things that we can also do. Instead of clear cutting an acre of trees, let's make it that if you're building a house or 2 homes, you only cut down the handful of trees that need to be cut down. If somebody comes in and they're going to cut trees, you should really have to make a showing of why these mature trees need to come down for whatever it is you're proposing to build. I think the problem is all too often you come in and it's just, oh, we're gonna take everything, and that's not reasonable. And I think we need to make sure that that is something that gets stopped and prevented going forward.
Thank you. Ms. Haire, the quality of the water in our rivers and the bay continues to be a major concern. One solution might be to increase public access and involvement for people not living on the water. Alternatively, what other idea would you advance to increase public interest and support for better water quality?
I think it's important that everyone take an interest in, and this is where we live, right? Whether you live on the water or off the water, this is where we live. I think it's really important. I think we get people involved by starting young. We start kids, middle school, high school, these are, they already do some field trips to these areas, but I think some of the community service hours can be started with, going to the West Road Riverkeeper and learning about that and doing some community cleanup efforts. I think that's an interesting place to start. I think it helps get the communities involved. I mean, I know when our older daughter needed to do community service, I went and did it with her. And I learned a lot about what she was working on in that particular capacity. I think that would be a helpful way to get more communities involved. We have over 500 miles of shoreline, and certainly we need to take care of it and take care of our rivers and make sure that they last.
Thank you. Kitchin.
Yeah, so again, we're going to agree a lot on that. You do start young, just building interest. Last Friday, I went with my kindergartner to one of those projects where we went to Downs Park on Pasadena, right on the bay, and we learned about trees and we learned about water and we learned about forests. And so we are doing good things there, and certainly water access is another way. But I think one of the ways we increase interest in the water in the bay is modeling that interest as a government. And we have not done that. We have 531 miles of shoreline or so. We have more shoreline than any county in the entire United States. We should be a leader on these issues. And right now we're not. The trees are the #1 thing that we need to have clean water, to have clean rivers and a clean bay. I don't care how good of an engineer you are, you're never going to design something man-made that's going to be as good for our rivers as a tree. You're just not. We have been the second worst in the state for cutting down, for losing clear-cutting forests to the forces of overdevelopment. We're the second worst. This has not been a priority for us. We have actively used the county government and the county office of law to try to break and find loopholes in the Maryland critical area laws. We've not been a leader in this. And so we as a public, the county council and the county government represents in some real ways just the goals of the people as a whole in our ideals and our statements, and we have not prioritized protecting the bay and protecting our rivers. And we can do that, and we need to. There's a reason why bay grasses are coming back throughout the bay, not at the same rate in Anne Arundel County, because we are not doing a good enough job, and we could do it in a way that doesn't make environmentalists and the watermen butt heads. So we can trust the watermen. They know the water better than any of us, and we can bring those people together, and we can spur those maritime industries as well. So one of the big things we need to do is focus on strengthening our maritime industries and make sure they don't go away in a generation.
Mr. Kitchin, one of the jobs of the county administration, county government, is to look for the next generation of industry or the next generation of revenue for the county. Mm-hmm. What do you see as the next generation of industry that the county can focus on, and how would you foster it?
That's a very good question. I think it's going to be renewable energy. I think it's going to be the next generation of industry in this county. Is we should become a leader in solar, and we should become a leader in just putting together wind turbines and installing them, and requiring, if we as a county can get up to the state mandated goals in renewable energy and lead on that, I think that's going to generate a whole lot of jobs and a whole lot of economic development in the county. And again, we should be leaders on this. We have more coastline than anyone else, but this should be a top priority to us. We are going to be affected by sea level rise more than most jurisdictions in this country. And so I think the sustainable energy is going to be really the next level, and I would definitely like to work with the county council and the county executive in order to build incentives around those kind of industries, as opposed to the current incentives we do for the developers to clear cut our trees and to do all those. We need to stop subsidizing that kind of development. We need to, or that kind of economic activity. We need to start subsidizing renewable economic activity, which I think we can do. But we also need to not just look to the future. We do also want to preserve both our farming industries and our maritime industries in Anne Arundel County, especially here in South County. And I think we can do all of that. So I think we definitely have to keep an eye on how do we keep and preserve some of these awesome things about our heritage that make Anne Arundel County what it is, while at the same time moving to the future with renewable energy as well. And I think that's can be done, and I'd be very happy to be a part of doing it.
Thank you. Ms. Haire.
This feeds right into the discussion that I started earlier today about the landfills and ways to use it. I think that this is a terrific area where the county can take the lead, and we can show other parts of the state that we are a leader on this. So that's certainly something I would like to get moving, particularly given the revenue generation that it provides for the county as well. Could you read the question one more time?
Sure.
Just to make sure I'm
It's what do you see as the next big industry or revenue generator for the county, and how would you foster it?
Yeah, so I think really looking for those areas like landfills that cannot otherwise be used, and really using those to our advantage to generate this type of energy and revenue for the county. Looking at things like the forestry management, these are ways where we can, in an environmentally sound fashion, move the county forward and generate revenue.
Ms. Haire, according to the last numbers that the county has reported, the number of overdoses and deaths from opioids continues to increase and is running about an 18% fatality rate in Anne Arundel County. What is the county doing wrong, or what do you think it should be doing different with regard to the opioid crisis?
I don't think we have enough wraparound services. This is heartbreaking for me. Again, the Women's Commission did an Narcan training. I've talked a lot to Wes Adams about this. He's got a personal story that goes with this. This is a really heart-wrenching situation. I think the safe stations is a great beginning. It's fantastic that somebody can come and turn themselves in and get the help that they need at that point. The problem is we don't have the services on the back end to really make sure that the people who come and want to get clean stay clean. We don't necessarily have the ability, we don't have liaisons with certain agencies or workforces that are willing to hire someone who is in recovery like that. We need the transportation, the wraparound services. We need more people who are willing to provide that, because it's a long road and the whole family is involved. And I met recently with a woman. They actually just opened up shop here in Edgewater, right off Mitchell's Chance Road, and they're trying to put this type of program together. She's a licensed clinician, and they're trying to make these connections because there are so many even high school students that we're seeing who are overdosing. And I really think at the back end is where the county hasn't gotten there yet, and that's where we need to go.
Okay, Ms. Kitchin.
Yeah, so I'm not going to say anything too differently than that, because actually I do think it's at that back end. The safe stations is a great program. That's one of the areas that our government is doing a good job in. That is a way we are leading as a local jurisdiction throughout the country. We've gotten national recognition for it. It's a good thing. The problem is what happens when they leave. And so I've heard some people, and I've heard the SHU administration throw out, like X number of people, we've never seen them again. So it's like they leave and they don't come back to that same station, and they're like, hey, that's great. But we don't know where they go. And statistics will tell you, and the studies will tell you, that 90% of people that don't get medically assisted treatment relapse. That's a fact. That's what it is. And so we have to find a way to get people from safe stations or get people from their homes and the crisis response teams into medically assisted treatment fast. And we just can't do that right now. So people will come to a safe station, and it'll be like days, sometimes a week before they can actually find someone who can give them that help. And if we're not getting them the medically assisted treatment that they need, 90% of the time, they are absolutely going to relapse. And we've all seen this. There's an ambulance at my house again last night for a guy who lives 5 houses down. It's like the 4th or 5th time it's been there in the last 2 years. And it is. If they're not getting the help they need after they've said they want the help, then we're not going to be able to really solve this epidemic. And that's where we've got to go. There's state grant money, there's federal grant money available to help do that. And I do think we need to create a program where we can then get people from those stations into medically assisted treatment on the same day, within a couple hours, hopefully. And that's where the next move is in our efforts to deal with the opioid crisis.
Thank you. Mr. Kitchens, if you're elected, what do you consider the most important constituent service you will provide?
The most important constituent service, I think, would be helping individuals navigate the county government. When people have thought, seniors have said, like, right? When I went to the senior center here in Edgewater, and when I did ride the circulator bus, there were seniors who were complaining about, I called the Office of Transportation, and it rings and rings and rings, and I don't get called back, and that doesn't happen. And, we are having issues with development where it's like, hey, how, where can we push back? What does the code say? Like, what is going on here? And people just don't know. There's a lot of energy of people that want to be involved in their government and in what's going on in their communities, and there's not a good way for them to know, hey, this is the person you call, or this is what you need to go do, this is the form you need to fill out. So I think helping whatever the issue is, helping constituents, if it's, hey, there's this dead tree that's happened, there was a woman I was door knocking on almost a year ago, and I was like, what's your issue? And she was like, come in. She walked me in her house. I was like, this is kind of weird. And she walked me all the way to the back, and she pointed to this tree, and it was this dead tree that the county had marked like months ago that needed to be cut down because it was going to fall on her house. And they're like, they haven't cut it down. And so whatever your issue is, it's like, here's the person you need to call, and if you call it and they don't call you back, then I get on the phone and I'm like, hey, why aren't you calling my constituents back? Or I make the call for you if that's what needs to happen. So I don't think it's necessarily one area. It is listening to people's needs and then helping them navigate the crazy bureaucracy that is our government right now at any level. I think is the most important service.
Thank you. Sarah.
In a similar fashion, open lines of communication. I think the most important constituent service that somebody on the county council can provide is constant accessibility and letting you know that I am listening. I want to listen. I want to hear exactly what it is that's bothering you, what isn't bothering you, what's working well, what isn't working well. These are the reasons that we're there, not just in the county council meetings, but I mean any time. And I think that that's something that a lot of people I hear are missing. Not related to any specific person, but a lot of times you hear, I can't get anybody to listen to me. I have this great idea. I have this thought. I live in this area, so I live and breathe this issue every single day, and I know it better than other people who live down the road, across the street even, and I have something to say. That open line of communication will enable us to move forward with the best general development plan that incorporates the community concerns and the community desires. It helps us incorporate any bills that are going through exactly what the community is looking for and by ways of protections, etc.
Okay. Final question of the evening before we go to closing statements. A lot of politics, a lot of discussion about what's broke, what doesn't work, and what needs to be changed. In the course of the campaign, what makes you feel optimistic?
So, as an engineer, I believe we can fix things. This is what we do. There's a problem, we find a solution. And sometimes it means backing off, right? Sometimes that means you don't build additional homes, but you find that solution. I approach every problem that way with that optimism. As an attorney, often we're there on the back end when the damage has already been done and people are fighting and you're trying to deal with it. And I still like to come at things from the front end, from the engineer side, and say, what can we do to make this better? How can we improve this for everyone? And, for what it's worth, that's how I approach everything, and I am confident. I live here, you live here. I want this to be the best Anne Arundel County that it can possibly be. And I promise to give it my all and really take that optimism and that just absolute determination to find a solution for whatever the issues are.
Yeah, I think what has given me the most hope is that there are so many groups of people and so many communities that want to be involved in what is going on. Like coming down to the Mayo Peninsula over the past year, as many times as I have, and just watching the neighbors of the Mayo Peninsula put together, the Envision Mayo program, hosting information sessions on what it's like to live on a peninsula, being part of the coalition in Crofton that's pushing back against the enclave. Like there are so many volunteer hours that get put into those kinds of things by people that actually really do care about their communities. And seeing that gives me hope. Seeing that energy, seeing that excitement, seeing that tenacity in you all has given me a lot of hope. And I've had a conversation with a handful of you in this room where it's like, we keep kicking, we keep screaming, and we keep telling the county they have to listen to us. And I'm like, yeah, because right now that's what you have to do. But wouldn't it be great if the county worked on our side? Wouldn't it be great if, yes, we still have to tell them what we want, but it was the systems of power set up in a way where county was incentivized to listen to you, and it's no longer kicking and screaming. It's like, hey, how do we actually make government work with the people? But your energy has given me hope, and then the way that a message of changing that power structure, the way that's resonated with people, has also given me hope. Like I've ran a campaign on a shoestring budget, fueled, 90% by super small donations by people that live in this district, and that there are enough people out there that have just believed in a message of campaign finance, of doing government differently, of actually going after the money and the developers. That there's enough of you out there that have had faith in that message to actually make a campaign like mine viable. Has also been very hopeful. I've met a lot of good people throughout this campaign, and your energy and the way that people have been receptive to a vision of we can fundamentally do government differently. And if we don't, there's not going to be a lot of hope for this country. We've got to do it differently, but that message resonates, and that is very hopeful.
Okay, before we go to closing statements, on behalf of the neighbors of the Mayo Peninsula, I want to thank the candidates for attending tonight. I certainly want to thank all of you for your interest, for your questions, for your curiosity. We will be posting a video of the event tonight, so if your neighbors were not able to attend, we encourage you to invite them to watch the video and get educated on this. We invite you to continue to be engaged. I retired last September after 30 years in the United States Air Force. I have served all over the world. I can tell you the right to vote is not a given. It is a privilege. It is also a responsibility. We do these events to keep you engaged and educated. Please take advantage of that and use your vote. Ms. Haire, you have the beginning closing statement.
Thank you. Really, I'd like to take this time to thank all of you. It is incredible that you have put this together. This is the second one of these that we've attended here for Mayo specifically, and other communities have done it too. Crofton, we've been a lot of places, other places in Edgewater, etc. And it's fantastic to listen to all of your questions and meet you all individually, and I really appreciate that you're choosing to spend your night with us. We realize you also have a lot of other things you probably could spend your night with, and this is really important and heartening to see. I would just like to close with the fact that I am qualified. I believe I can do a tremendous job for you. I have had bipartisan support from all areas of District 7. Democrats in South County, independents in Mayo, retired teachers and civil engineers in Edgewater, Crofton, etc. I believe that I can bring bipartisan solutions to the table. I have spoken with small businesses. I have really worked hard to get to know as many individuals as I possibly can. I would welcome any additional questions you have. I would welcome the opportunity to speak to each one of you individually after this, and please take some literature. If you are so inclined, please take a yard sign. On my literature, like I said, my cell phone, my email is on there. If you think of a question tomorrow, please, I have young kids, I'm up at all hours of the night. Feel free to email me anytime. I would be happy to talk with you further, and I would ask for your vote on November 6th. Thanks so much.
So I too just want to thank you all for being here. I think you've heard, there's two very qualified candidates that you have to decide between. I think a lot of what the decision on November 6th is going to come down to is who you trust to follow through on all of these things for you when they're in office. And I'd like to put to you that I do think that the person who's taken no money from developers is the one you can trust more to push back against developers and push back against those business interests. I mean, if there's anyone here that doesn't think money talks, then that's totally fine. But I think most of us know that it does, that money buys you power. And that's something I've been very conscious of, because if we don't get this general development plan right, and if we don't get this comprehensive zoning plan right, and if we don't push back now, there's not going to be enough time left to actually save Anne Arundel County from the forces of overdevelopment. It is now that we've got to take a stand, which is why in the very beginning, before I actually filed a run, I made the decision I would not take $1 of developer money. I think that matters. I think that means that you can trust me to be on your side, not on the side of big developers once I get in office. I also have a lot of bipartisan support. I have been, again, endorsed by the teachers. I've been endorsed by the police. I've been endorsed by the firefighters. Groups that typically endorse Republicans as a whole have endorsed me because they know that I'm the one that they can trust to get the job done. You talk to the police, and look, what is one of their biggest issues? It's the stresses that overdevelopment puts on the police department. They have less officers on the streets now than they did when Steve Shue took office, and we have a lot more building and a lot more people that live in the county now than when Steve Shue took office. And so they know that that message of growth and that message of going after the power is what's going to be best for the police. Stand with the police on November 6th and vote for me. Stand with the firefighters on November 6th and vote for me. The people who do the work on the ground, on the environment, the Sierra Club, the League of Conservation Voters, they've all looked at us. They've looked at both of the candidates. They've heard what we've had to say, and they trust me to get the job done when we're there. So you've heard a lot of similar things from two qualified people. Again, it's who do you trust to get the job done? And I ask for you to stand with me and with all the groups that have backed me on November 6th. So I ask for your vote as well.
Thank for spending the time with us this evening and letting us know what's on their mind. Tomorrow night at 7 o'clock at the Maryland Hall is the County Executive Forum. I think it'll be something similar in nature. So we will be there. So we'll see you there. Good evening.